And I think having this perspective from different point of view. I'm also a software engineering guy. I have a textbook which is being used in many places. And I also should mention that many years back, I was part of a team developing the first e-commerce in Canada. That was in 1988, even before the setup that is on the internet in the mid-90s. It was a system called Alex, and through which you can have booking of restaurants and movie theaters and access to catalogs and etc. I'll be here right after the conference because I'm chairing this conference, unluckily at the same time in Kuwait University, and it happened to be the same dates, 15, 17, so I have to run. I wasn't here yesterday also. I'll be talking about cybersecurity from a broad bird's view and high-level view. I'll be talking about policy and importance of policy, talk about cybersecurity domains. Briefly, we'll go through cybersecurity evolution, objectives, and I'll talk about cybersecurity policy as a project and as a project management, from a project management point of view, and what I call the policy catalog, starting from a taxonomy of policies, through which we can take advantage of maybe industry tried policies that we can adopt, we can work with, so we can use it for our own industry or our own organization. 2 days ago, I read this, and I thought maybe I should put it from the newspaper here, that electronic crimes cost the world economy 445 billion a year, and that is really very interesting. It coincides with it. I think there is a exhibition, maybe is it here? I don't know. The Gulf Security Exhibition, the third Gulf Security Exhibition, I think here in Kuwait. In terms of cybersecurity, well, by the way, the word cybersecurity now is a buzzword, but it used to be computer security, then information security, and then most conferences, most work on security mention cybersecurity to replace the other two most often. Cybersecurity, we have three triads that are very important. Goals to achieve security, we want to prevent. And I'm preaching the prevention approach, because developing policy and satisfying strategies through policies is a way of preventing, deterring people that have bad intentions from really doing damage to your organization. Those people that have bad intentions could be internal, and that's why we need policies that are to be enforced internally. And also for the general public, we may have also policies that may deter as a way of prevention. If we fail in prevention, and still those smart people can get around and attack us, we should be able to detect, and this is where technology is used. And once we detect, the earliest we detect, the response will be much efficient, and the damage will be much short-lived and maybe recoverable and undoable in an efficient way. We do those through people, through process, and through technology. This triad is very important. Like any project, like any system, people operate the system. People could be internal, external, users of the system. And we need processes that are well-tested, that are in place. And we need the technology. Processes, guidelines, policies, goals, all those things should be in place to really achieve cybersecurity. Technology is very important, but I should be very careful with technology. Technology changes a lot, and sometimes we cannot keep up with technology. So that's why it's not only technology that will help us. Policies that are enforced on people, policies that are policed and that are measured and that are updated regularly, I think is the best way to achieve cybersecurity. So this triad is very important. People should be aware of policies. People should be afraid of policies or the consequences of breaking policies. And definitely the ultimate goal of security is to achieve confidentiality, availability. This is what we call the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And the only way we can do this by people added a fourth letter, which is the accountability. I mean, accountability is very important, and accountability is a way also of deterring, okay? And accountability through policies is very important. So we can say that cybersecurity is one definition based on this triad is methods of using people, process, technology to prevent, detect, and recover from damage to confidentiality, integrity, and availability of systems that we are trying to secure. Now, why do we need a cybersecurity policy? The whole idea of cyber and using devices on the internet and the cyberspace really increase productivity. And by increasing productivity, by making things available, downloadable, usable to users, we are aiming at higher availability. The more you want your system available, like public or semi-public or intranet or whatever, that will raise security concerns. So this is a trade-off you have to make between the higher demand for cyber functionality. People want available system, higher availability, and your requirement, your organization requirements for security, and there will be a conflict, and your cybersecurity policy will try to regulate this conflict. And cybersecurity policies should be higher directives. They should not be technology-oriented. They should not be low-level things. I'll talk about it. Designed to maintain cybersecurity. This is, in academia, we use more of modeling and things that we like to play with. This is what we call a systemogram. I don't know how many of you have heard of this. Systemogram is a graph that will allow you to see what do you want to define and what is the goal of your definition. And the items in the middle are ways to reach your definition. So if I want to define cybersecurity, I would say cybersecurity policy would be used to codify my goals, so I have to identify my goals, and those goals are to support my constituents, and my constituents, as a result of this policy, should modify their behavior, and by modifying their behavior, that produces cybersecurity. So this is a people-oriented approach. I want to change behavior, and this is what policy is about. When I teach information security, I ask students to go to the web and look for policies, especially university policies. And when you go to university policies, sometimes you find a policy that is outdated, that is never maintained, that students do not know about. We did something for Kuwait University. Students do not know about email policies. They do not know about a good use policy. They are there, but nobody knows about them. So awareness is not there. So it's very important to be able to change behavior is to make people aware, your constituents aware of what you are publishing and what you are allowing and disallowing through policies. This is a more complex systemogram, but a part of this is this bold path. But you could see this is very complex. By doing cybersecurity, the aim is protect organizations. Organizations have systems, and systems, whether industrial control systems or e-health systems or whatever, systems are made of resources. And in systems, I need controls that will enforce the security of system. And I have information, I need to protect it. The image is so complex that if I really want to achieve cybersecurity, I have to really address many of the issues here. There are some technology-based, there are some management-based issues, allocation of resources, whether human resources, financial, and etc. If you look at constituents, this is very important now in project management and in any project is to address stakeholders' requirements. And one of the main stakeholders are constituents, which are mostly users that are making use of your system. So by identifying stakeholders, and constituents, the main constituents is very important in a policy-driven approach, because these are the people that have to be aware, that have to be trained, and etc. Now, domains of cybersecurity policy, there are different views of cybersecurity policy. I will run through here, but very important to, and different people have different views of cybersecurity. Government, they have different views. They talk more about policies, legislations, and maybe they are lacking strategies, but not positioned in this area. Corporations, they have maybe a chief information security officer that deals with the information security policies and etc. The corporation may try to enforce and look at standards. And very often you see organizations saying, well, our policy is to follow this standard. And I would caution against this, because standards are very generic. They apply to all sorts of organizations. If I talk about ISO 27000 for security, and they renamed it to something else, these are really generic, and they don't make policies. Okay, I'll talk about policies as achieving goals, and goals to meet a certain strategy. So we have to really first know our strategy as an organization, then what are our goals, security goals, and through which we can define our policies that are needed to meet those goals. I think I'll run quickly here, but the last one is technology configuration. Very often you hear about a firewall policy. If you ask some technically savvy people in some organization, they say, yeah, we have policies, we have firewall policy. Firewall policy is not the policy that I'm talking about. Firewall policy change with a firewall, with different configuration, different vendor, and so it's not really a policy. Some people look at, I mentioned as one domain is laws and regulation, as one domain of policies, enterprise policies to reduce risk, but here also very often we don't have a CISO, we have middle-level managers that take decisions that look at the short-term economics versus the longer-term investment in security. So this is not also the policies that I'm talking about. Technology operations policy, again, technology-oriented. And the last one is the technology configuration policy. None of them is the policies that we should really look at. Policy, for me, are higher-level management directives that articulate and codify a strategy. So very important that we have a strategy for overall cybersecurity goal achievement. And it is a preventative security management tool. So policy is to prevent, and to be effective, people have to be aware of those of the policy, and they have to be aware of it, and policies have to be updated based on regular maintenance, based on certain metrics. And I should talk about collecting metrics about policies. How effective is a policy? And based on this, closing the loop, modify our policies so that we adapt to maybe new requirements, to new behaviors, and etc. So this type of definition of higher level management directives as opposed to policies that address technology-oriented processes. And here comes the cyber security management cycle based on policy. Definitely, initially, we have to have a strategy. What is the strategy, organizational strategy? And here we have to align it with business. We talk a lot about business alignment of security requirement and our business. And based on this, we produce policy. I don't know if I'll go quickly through a catalog of policies. It doesn't mean that each organization will have this set of policies, but we produce policies that satisfy a subset based on our strategy. we activate awareness. Awareness program is very important. Otherwise, how can you enforce something that people are not aware of? And we control by measuring, by observing the behaviors. Are the policies usable? Are people following the policy? How many misuse were collected, and etc. And based on this, maybe the policy is unusable because of certain flaws in it. Maybe it is not usable, it's not readable, maybe it's not accessible, maybe it is not well propagated and well publicized. And based on this, we can close the loop and modify our policies. This is very important. You could see policies on the internet that are maybe 20 years old and never updated, and that is not what we want. I think I'll skip all this. This is just about how simple our systems were and how security was much simpler at the beginning. And with the advances in with the internet, we started to have access, remote access through different ways. We started to have propagation of viruses through floppy disks. And we started to talk about simple firewalls, demilitarized zones, proxy servers to avoid web server attacks. In the mid-90s, this is where we started with e-commerce. We have different concerns. They are mostly business-oriented because attackers wanted to attack the value, the services that you are offering in terms of providing or selling things on the net. And here comes the advances in information security, the secure HTTP, secure socket layer. We started to talk about digital certificates and signatures. We start to have different types of attacks. Again, the more you do security, the attackers will come up with new things. We start to talk about flaws in the access to databases through queries. SQL injection was a very famous software security flaw. And we start to have attacks to deny service, the e-commerce service, by putting your service down, denial of service attack, and distributed denial of service attack. And to counter this, we start to talk about intrusion detection systems, tripwires, and etc. The figure becomes more and more complex. Access is more on systems. In the mid-2000s, we started to talk about different things, software security related mostly. And I should caution, software is the weakest area in security. People, in terms of physical security, we do very well. In terms of hardware security, there is lots of advances by the big companies, Intel and etc., to secure CPUs and etc. But the software area is the weakest point because this is the least understood by people. Software is not easy to deal with, coming from a software engineering background. We start to talk about malware, worms, and spyware. These are all software-related things. In terms of physical security, emerged again in the 2000s. I think you could hear 4 million laptops stolen in 1 year, I think around 2006 or 7. So the organized crime concentrated on stealing laptops and tapes and USB devices people forget. And there are lots of horror stories from insurance companies that lost lots of this type of data. Also, the open source software is a source of bad use. I mean, I caution against blindly take open source software and install it. Because, again, validation techniques are not so 100% secure or sure that they will clean your software before you submit for production or for freeware. We talked about intrusion prevention systems at that point, email filters, web access firewalls, and static dynamic code analyzer. This is to deal with software while it is running or software before you submit it. It has to go through static analysis in order to remove as much as possible of the errors. In validation and in software testing, it is theoretically proven you cannot test software 100%, and especially software that exceeds 10,000 lines. I'm talking about telephony software, could be 20 million lines and other software, operating system software. And these are very large software. You cannot test it thoroughly. You cannot say, I have tested my software 100%. Now let me maybe I should. Well, here I emphasize the importance of metrics. You develop your policy. Why do you change it? You change it after observing and after seeing its effectiveness. No policy is, again, like software, no policy is 100% correct from the first time. It may go through a process of change. So you have to, when do you change? You change based on metrics. Now, if you look at the metrics are very important. In the CMMI model, the integration, Carnegie Mellon Institute capability maturity model integration, metrics makes you at the top. I think you would be at level 4. Once you take advantage of those metrics to improve your system, and this is, again, same applies to policy. Once you improve your policy, you move to level 5, which is the highest level. Not many organizations have achieved this level 5. So metrics is a challenge. People collect data, but they don't know sometimes why are they collecting. We do it very often in many places. But then when we have the data, we don't act on it. The purpose of collecting data costs money. It costs personnel, it costs time, it costs processing. It may cause overhead on your computing resources. So if you collect, you should collect data that you think are going to be used. And based on the collection of data, you should have the tools to analyze this collected data and to come up with a change plan. And change plan applies also to policy change plan. Well, this is the importance of metrics. Again, complex picture. One approach to security, whether doing it trial and error iteratively, or whether doing it by design. Security by design is a concept that is now emerging because, or design for security is very important, is to embed design security in your design before you deal with security as an aftermath. It's like in a building. If you never thought about security, you'll find the cameras very clear after, because they were added after. But if security is embedded in the design of the building, you won't feel that there are any cameras around. So this is very important design for security concept. Now here I want to talk about, well, this is metrics. Where do you collect metrics? And this is a business-oriented view of metrics collection. Metrics about the product security, about the service, security of the service, security of the return on investment, outsourcing, security on policy. And here we are zooming into how the policy coverage is done, and security or metrics on information classification. In terms of measurement, we measure two things, and we want to make sure that we distinguish between the two, measuring the process or measuring the product. We want to make sure, I think in terms of policy, we want to make sure that we have designed the right system. The right system was built, and this is what we call correctness, or we call validation, not versus verification. Counting vulnerability is not a way of metrics. You could find lots of websites maintained. There is a famous website called Risk, Computer Risk, and etc. There is NIST, they have a website. They talk about flows, and every time there is a new flow or vulnerability, they mention how many and etc. But this is not useful. Now, in terms of security policies, we have different approaches. I think I'll skip here. I'll go to my catalog approach to security. This is about policy as a project. So consider developing policies as your little internal project for the security department. As part of it is create awareness and develop your metrics, measuring them. It's a project plan. And this is how you develop your goals, from which you develop your policies. I want to talk about this quickly, about the catalog approach. Here, there is a lot of policies There is a lot of context, industrial context, where policies should be useful. We identify different areas of policies. We have governance policies, user-oriented policies, conflict-oriented policies, management policies, and infrastructure policies. We know about email policies, privacy policy. We see them in the websites and etc. So this is well covered. But there is a wide range of policy taxonomy that will allow you to maybe you will have your own policy that may fit one of the categories. You can add it. So there is a concept of catalog of policies, policies that may be reusable, may be adaptable to your own purpose, to your own goals, but definitely you should have your extra, you should go the extra mile to adapt it to your context. In this catalog of policies, you have the policy statement, the explanation, and why we need this policy. I'll go quickly to give you an idea about, okay, in terms of governance issues, you have different, these are high level, maybe country-related, international issues. What defines a cybercrime, appropriate use policy, impersonation policy. These are privacy policy, very important. Conflict policy, this is related to espionage, industrial sabotage, and warfare, and etc. But let me go to the infrastructure issues. Well, within this taxonomy, within cyber infrastructure, for example, NIP has identified 18 areas of critical infrastructure and key resources, they call it CIKRs, managed by the private sector, and they dictate that these sectors